Good afternoon and welcome. Today we have another RA Group webcast for you, and it is the first in our series of Wellness Wednesdays, which is very exciting. Luxey today will take us through how food and mood are so interlinked and related. So, Luxey, that's over to you.
Thanks, Steph. Hi everyone. So today we're going to be discussing the links between food and mood. And you've probably heard over time lots of associations between the type of food that we eat and how it can possibly have an influence on our moods, brain activity and mental health. So the main agenda for today that I'm going to outline will be first touching a bit about mental health. And exactly why it is actually quite an important association and a lot of emerging science and research in the field. And then going on to talk about good mood for food. So you might have heard of this before, you might have even heard of these particular sort of claims and some of the nutrients that are actually involved in helping sort of stimulate positive mental well-being and positive health in relation to your moods. And then a little about the gut-brain axes, which is a really exciting field in the nutrition world at the moment. It's been researched probably over the last decade, but has definitely grown over the last 5 years at least, in terms of the relationship between how our gut and brain interact with each other and how that can influence certain outcomes in terms of health. And then finally, one that is definitely getting a lot more traction now as well in terms of physical activity and exactly what link that has in with our mental health and how it can quite possibly support and embrace and influence how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So if we start with looking at mental health, so it probably will come as no surprise in terms of some of the stats here. So just the one that you can see. So 1 in 4 people approximately will experience a mental health problem each year. So it is something that is a problem that we do need to address. And one thing that I think many people may have seen now is the Public Health England campaign about Every Mind Matters. It started at the end of last year, and you may have seen on the TV adverts and promos on exactly how your mind and health and well-being is all interlinked. And you can actually go on, it's called everymindmatters.com, and there's a whole host of resources and national campaigns to help support. And one thing about mental health which is worth mentioning, it's very complex, so it's multifaceted. It involves lots of biological, psychological, social and environmental factors that can cause poor mental health, and often nutrition is something that is overlooked. So it tends to not be considered sometimes as something that could be quite preventative, I suppose, and most likely used alongside traditional solutions such as drugs and other types of therapies. So it's definitely something that's worth investing in and knowing a little bit more about how the foods you consume can interact with your mental well-being. So looking at good mood for food. So most of the sort of nutrients and macros that are sort of associated with good mental health links from things like carbohydrates. So that will probably come as no surprise. So carbohydrates in terms of a sustained supply of glucose for the brain. So usually dips in this sort of deficiencies or lower levels of carb intake probably aren't too uncommon, with associated feelings of feeling irritable, slightly low mood and energy levels dropping. And that's probably something most of you may well have experienced at some point. And it may be something that you've probably not thought of in terms of your diet, or has it got to do with things you've eaten or lack of having certain things, but it definitely has a role to play. And then another big one is the lack of vitamins and minerals that can result in low mood, energy and reduced brain function. So there is science and good evidence to show that the lack of some of these vitamins and minerals does have a really strong part to play. So things such as iron, folate, selenium, and then your B vitamins. So iron, I've just put here the types of sources that you can find these minerals and vitamins in if you do struggle with any of the following. So iron you can find in red meat, fish, beans, and folate, mainly looking at your sort of green leafy veg. And when you're talking about sort of your B vitamins in particular, so whole grain cereals, meat, fish and dairy, and It's the idea that your whole grains can provide you with the actual nutritionals and minerals needed to help fuel your brain as well. So it's very important to try and aim for a diverse and balanced diet, and that's the way in which you can tend to sort of meet most of these needs. It's something when you probably see sort of on a screen, it might look a bit daunting of how do I sort of incorporate all of this, but much of this is very much goes back to the principles of a healthy balanced diet and how easy it can be to incorporate much of this. And then another really important one is your fish oils, so your omega-3s and your 6. These are essential fatty acids, meaning that you can't make them in your body and you must obtain them from your diet. So looking at the sources, oily fish is definitely something to try and include. We should be aiming for 2 portions of fish a week, one of which should be oily. But equally, if you don't consume that in your diet, some other alternative sources are things such as chia and flax seeds, which are still good sources. And the only thing I would say here, if you're vegetarian or vegan, is also possibly looking at a supplement, just because the way in which our body can convert the oils found in chia and flax seeds is not necessarily as effective to converting them into omega-3 and 6. So possibly looking at an algae supplement instead, if needed, to enrich your diet as well. Another really important one is caffeine. So having too much can also have adverse effects too. So just being quite mindful of what exactly your quantity and consumption behaviour looks like in terms of how much caffeine you actually have. And I suppose one of the biggest things, especially with good mood for food, is putting it all into context of what that looks like for your day. So if you are having a busy day and you tend not to actually have opportunities to eat meals sort of at breakfast, lunch, certain regular times, that can also have a massive part to play with your mood. And I guess it's something that's always been discussed, which is whether poor food is a result of poor mental health or if it's vice versa. And that's something that's always quite interesting because it can be a result of both. So making poor dietary choices can in fact influence poor mental health, but equally due to a poor mental health, you might in fact be making those poor dietary choices. So it's just understanding exactly that relationship that you have with food, how often you actually are able to consume a wide range of nutrients and a very diverse diet. But equally, if you are feeling certain sort of symptoms in terms of low mood or energy levels or productivity to some extent too, it may well be worth first looking at your diet to actually see, is there something I could look at? And it might even help keeping something as simple as like a food diary. So over a week, maybe even writing down what have you been consuming for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or all your various meals and beverages. And it just gives you a bit of an indication to look back and maybe even writing down how you felt on each of those days. And you can definitely start to look at some of the comparisons of days in which perhaps you've had quite an erratic schedule, back-to-back calls, which I'm sure many of us can definitely relate to, and not having opportunities to hydrate or eat regular meals. And you can probably see different effects in terms of work performance with that too. So definitely worth considering. And another area, so your gut-brain axes. So this is really exciting. It's something there's still a lot of research going into, and we definitely need a lot more in order to fully understand exactly what happens. But there's, I suppose, good evidence now to suggest that our gut, so our microbiome, where we've got trillions of different bacteria, does in fact communicate with our brain. So it's a two-way communication system, is what we understand. And you may have heard our gut being classed now as almost our second brain. And that is because of exactly that. It can communicate with the brain, but it's the fact that by influencing your diet, you're able to actually change the trillions of bacteria that are in your gut microbiota. So, a lot of the time people do say, well, actually, you know, I don't eat very well. Can I really make that drastic change straight away and see that impact? And you can with your diet, and especially with your gut health. Small changes in your dietary behavior can impact your the gut bacteria almost immediately. So within the next few days, you'll start to see it. Your gut microbiota will have changed. So it is definitely never too late to start addressing any dietary changes that you wish to make. And there is research to show that a Mediterranean diet could help improve symptoms. So quite an iconic study that happened, I think it was in 2017 now, called the SMILES trial, which looked at basically applying a dietary intervention to a subselection of people who were diagnosed with depression. And then there was a second group that had the social support. So they had the social support not with the diet, and the other group had it with the social support along with the diet. And they were able to see that those who had the dietary intervention had improved in terms of their symptoms of feelings of low mood and certain psychometric parameters that they have in place to sort of look at depression. It's not to say that it completely reversed what they were feeling. They were still continuing to take medication throughout it, but it was to show that actually diet had a very strong place to strong part to play, and could in fact be considered at preventative, perhaps early onset, before someone goes on to develop clinical depression. It's perhaps something that could be considered as a course of treatment, which is quite interesting, and it's definitely something that's been continuing to be researched, and more studies are needed in that area just to actually understand the long-term implications. But it is definitely something that a lot more health professionals are acknowledging as being sort of hand in hand with the traditional methods of treating clinical psychology ailments. And there's also been quite exciting work in terms of probiotics. So probiotics are the live sort of microorganisms and supplements that you can actually take that can actually help improve certain aspects of your gut health. And there has been some studies to show it can in fact have a positive effect on certain mental health ailments as well. So in terms of improving levels of anxiety, it's again in its very initial stages. So there's, for every sort of study that shows that probiotics can in fact have a positive influence, there are those that show it can have no effect as well. So it's just mindful of, if you do include things such as probiotics, fermented foods, prebiotics in your diet, that's great. It's always great for your gut health, but just being careful in terms of, if you think it's directly associated to a particular mental health benefit, it's not quite there yet. So just being mindful of what else you can do to enrich your diet. But there's definitely growing research to suggest keeping a healthy gut microbiome is definitely the way to go. So I think we've got a question.
We do indeed. Gavin has sent a bit of a, I think, a wishful thinking question through, asking if there are good fatty oils in chocolate, and is that what makes his mood improve?
Great question. So actually, dark chocolate does have antioxidants and anthocyanins. So that's something. So that when I say dark chocolate, it's anything sort of 70% minimum sort of cocoa. And that can actually have positive effects. So thinking of things as sort of, especially with your brain, anti-inflammatory properties, and antioxidants can help with sort of free radicals that can sort of cause harm within the brain. So yeah, dark chocolate actually does have a part to play because it has a very high content. But obviously it's just making sure, it depends on moderation. It depends what kind of products you're going for. So bearing in mind it is chocolate at the end of the day. So if it has got added sugar in, it's just bearing in mind how that sort of sits up in your diet. But I'd say definitely you could, it's actually been shown to have really good and beneficial properties too. Another one?
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure he'll love that answer, by the way. He's always got a chocolate bar with him. Alice has just written in and asked, how do you start to eat well for your gut without getting caught up in fatty diets?
Yeah, great question, actually. And I think it's a really good one because there's always so much misinformation out there on all sorts of diets, and I think gut health at the moment is very trending, and I think it will continue to be so, definitely for the foreseeable as it stands. And I would say it's just almost going back to the basics. So it's things that everyone knows they should be having more of. So things like fruits, vegetables, plants, you should be having more of that in your diet, but it's actually how do you go about getting more of that in your diet. So even just tackling, I would say, each of your day parts. So at breakfast, for example, if you're going to have quite a hearty breakfast, so say something like porridge, trying to top that with some nuts and seeds, maybe some nut butter as well. So trying to make every sort of opportunity where you're eating, adding sort of simple things that you can help increase your fibre gradually. And it's also one to bear in mind, if you don't consume a lot of fibre in your daily diet, increasing it too quickly can also have adverse effects, unfortunately. So definitely doing it slow and steady, I would say, if you're not used to consuming large quantities of fibre, because you'll definitely feel some of the symptoms in your bowels. So I would say slowly introducing it is definitely one way. So it could even mean trying to introduce maybe 2 or 3 different types of veg 1 week into your diet, and then next week trying some other ones. And it's all about diversity. So a great way to do that is eating in season. So whatever seasonal in terms of fruits and vegetables, and can always be a cost-effective option too. So trying to make use of that and local produce is a great way to definitely diversify your diet. Perfect. Was there any other questions at this stage, or?
We do have another one here. So Gavin's just written in to say, do you have any recipe suggestions for this time of year that will help improve your mood?
Interesting. Yeah. So I would say, especially this time of year, I guess as everyone's probably experienced today in the heat wave, and as we continue to have quite good weather, hopefully, depending on where you are, I think it probably does depend on what you're consuming. So I would say trying to even sort of a well-balanced plant-based salad with some kind of whole grains. So whether that's using things like quinoa to have as a base. So you've got a great adequate supply of quality protein there, fiber, lots of different types of veg. I would say almost try and do almost like a salad bowl, if you like, but with grains as well. So you've got that steady supply of carbohydrate release to maintain your energy levels throughout the day, so you don't have a slump and end up having to reach for a really sort of high sugar, high fat snack to kind of get you through. But also pairing that with maybe some fruit and veg to also give you the vitamins and minerals that you need, and lots of leafy greens, I'd say. So almost constructing your own little plant-based bowl of goodness, I'd say.
Awesome, thanks.
No worries. And yeah, so the gut brain, like we said, it's just trying to diversify your diet as and where you can, and simple ways in which you can do that. So I think especially where if you do find you are time poor, planning, preparation, it might feel like at the end of an evening that's the last thing you want to do, but it will just save you so much time in between those calls of actually do your lunch prep the night before, and when it comes around to lunch the next day, you've actually got something already there for you to actually consume, as opposed to reaching for quite often what can be the easier option, which isn't necessarily the nutritious option, and ends up resulting in a lot more snacking and eating, whereas if you'd prepared and done that sort of meal prep, you probably wouldn't have been eating as much. Another area that definitely doesn't get as much attention, I would say, is physical activity. So there's been a lot of information, a lot of research looking at how physical activity can actually help improve our mental health too. And lots of studies, and it's probably now a consensus, I'd say, of actual activity. And when I talk about activity, it's not necessarily pounding the weights in the gym, just really simple activity of not sitting down. So going for a walk or standing, being outside, getting some fresh air can actually have really positive effects on your mental health. So especially where if you're stuck indoors a lot of the time, you're on sort of calls or in sort of doing work stuck behind a screen for a long period of time, even taking, I would say, a 10-minute break if you can, get out in your garden or even outdoors, and just get a little fresh air, and going for a little stroll or a walk, it can help sort of release the feel-good hormones, your endorphins, and it can sort of help improve your mood as well as your sleep quality. And it has been shown to help reduce sort of stress and anxiety and feelings of fatigue. And I would say the key with activity is definitely trying to find something you enjoy. So something that doesn't feel like a chore, or you feel you have to do it because you know it's good for you, but it's not something you enjoy. So I'd say trying to find that balance of what is something you'd actually continue to do because you actually enjoy it yourself, you see the benefits, and it's something you like. So it could be something as simple as going for a walk. Even something as a brisk 10-minute walk has been shown to have great health benefits. And it's also looking at something that's also sustainable. And I think that's key of, is it something you're going to continue, and will it become a sort of regular habit in your lifestyle? Because that's where I think a lot of people do fall on, of it might be something you commit to 1 month, and within the end of the week, you're very much, it's done, you're sort of over it, you won't continue with it. So I think finding something you enjoy, whatever that may be, and trying to incorporate that and keep that as a regular thing throughout your lifestyle. So whether that's something you do 2-3 times a week, and keeping that consistent, I would say is key. But it tends to go hand in hand, and how we speak about, I guess, health and well-being holistically anyhow. So your food, your nutrition, your physical activity, and then sleep is a really important one too, because all of these will contribute to helping produce sort of better sleep quality too. So if you kind of lack in any of these areas, you'll probably see that knock-on effect to your sleep health. And that's something I think definitely has detrimental effects that sort of carries over into your productivity and your work, where you do sort of feel low levels of energy and can't concentrate for long periods, and that ultimately will affect your productivity. So definitely worth considering nutrition when you think of your mood and think of mental health, and it can definitely go alongside traditional sort of treatment methods, I'd say, and definitely worth investing in. Do we have a question?
I was just wondering what your thoughts were. I mean, I've seen it advertised loads lately, and it might be just another fad, but we're really keen to kind of know what your thoughts are on intermittent fasting, and if that can have an impact on, does it actually work, do you think? Does it have an impact on your mood?
Yeah, so intermittent fasting is a really interesting one, actually. And it's definitely something I think it's definitely a lot more mainstream now. A lot of people do dabble in it and do try it. And I would say from a nutrition perspective, there is actually quite good quality evidence for it. It does depend the variation in which you do it, but it also depends on how you sustain it. So some people, they find it works really well, and quite naturally they're able to almost fall into a fasting period, if you like, depending on when your first meal is to when your last meal is, and almost eating in between that window. And there is research to suggest it actually can help improve your health, can help also maintain a good healthy weight too. But I would say it also depends on what those meals consist of. So it's just making sure what you're actually consuming when you do actually break that fast period. What does that look like? And is it still a healthy, balanced diet, and how you fit that in? But also bearing in mind, for some people, the whole fasting and periods where you can't consume foods can have a knock-on effect too. So it tends to be, you might find you're slightly more irritable, you have low moods, mood swings. Those are quite common symptoms of sort of a fasting period, if you like. But it all depends on how that sort of portrays, I guess, how you can context that to your actual lifestyle. So it might work quite well if you do have quite a busy day and you're actually able to fit all your eating periods within that window. So yeah, absolutely, very much varies individual to individual.
Interesting. Cool.
Perfect. I think that's all, unless we have any questions. But if you do want any further information, you can head over to Nourish Life, and we've got lots of information on there from anything you want to know about health and wellness as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Luxey. Absolutely incredible. And it makes so much sense that food and mood is so interlinked. I mean, the more research that is done, the more it actually really sits with me. So I can't wait to try some of your tips out this weekend, hopefully. We do hope you'll join us next time. Meanwhile, for more information about our program of discussions, please go to RA Group's website at www.ragroup.co.uk/news to download the broadcast link. And also don't forget that you can re-watch them on our YouTube channel at RA Group. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or suggestions about how you can get involved, please do email gavin.goody@ragroup.co.uk. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today. Have a fantastic afternoon, and we will see you same time, same place next time.